Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Carla Javits. I'm the CEO of REDF, and this is the REDF SIF program overview. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have a lot of people on the line. REDF, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we've been in business for almost 20 years, working primarily in California. And we resource social enterprises with financial assistance and business advice to help create jobs and opportunity for people who face barriers to go to work. We're really excited to be able to expand our work here in California and also for the first time really begin to fund organizations outside of California. So this is an overview session to provide you with as much information as we can about the competition we have underway under the auspices of the Social Innovation Fund. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Natasha, who's going to share some notes about housekeeping with you.
Before we dive deeper into the program overview, we'd like to address a few housekeeping items. Please feel free to submit your questions using the chat box throughout the presentation. All questions will be answered toward the end of the call. All logistical questions will be managed by me immediately. After today's meeting, both the PowerPoint presentation and the frequently asked questions will be posted on redf.org. Any additional questions after the webinar can still be sent to sif2015@redf.org. Again, that's sif2015@redf.org.
Hello, everyone. My name is Galiana Fajardo. I'm a senior associate and part of the REDF portfolio team. So as far as the agenda, we're hoping to accomplish a couple of things today. First, we want to give you an overview of kind of who REDF is and our programmatic model. We want to share with you the experience of being a portfolio member and kind of the benefits that you receive as being one of our grantees. We're going to go into some highlights of our current portfolio, our current SIF portfolio that began in 2010. And then we'll share with you the selection criteria for our new portfolio that will be beginning in 2016. And finally, we'll make sure to leave time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. So to give you a sense quickly of who you are, who you just heard from in the beginning was our President and CEO, Carla Javits. You also heard from our programs coordinator, Natasha McLaughlin, who is the administrator of this webinar. She'll be standing by for any technical issues you may have. Nicole Simoneau will be speaking shortly. She is our Director of Portfolio and Advisory Services. And then finally, we have Karen Chern, who's one of REDF's portfolio managers. She'll share with you our selection criteria for our new SIF portfolio. One thing I wanted to share was REDF's mission. REDF's mission is to create jobs and employment opportunities for people who face the hardest barriers to work. We're a California-based intermediary. The way we do this is by investing capital and expertise in social enterprises that support individuals that want a job but have a really tough time getting one. People such as people that have experienced incarceration, homelessness, mental health disabilities, trauma, and/or disconnected youth. These are really individuals that want a job but need a chance to do so. Now, what you see here is our portfolio. We wanted to give you a sense of the types of companies that we funded in the past, as well as the ones that we fund today. So the organizations that are listed at the top are social enterprises that are currently in our portfolio. CRC, Buckaloo, and Grease Streets are organizations that have exited our portfolio about a year or two ago. Currently, there are 7 social enterprises within our portfolio. We also funded organizations in 1997, and a few of those are highlighted below. As you can see, there's just a wide range of the types of organizations and social enterprises that we funded in the past. There's pest control, general contracting, maintenance, staffing, and thrift stores. And really, this is just our current portfolio. In the past, we've also funded social enterprises that focus on screen printing, recycling, conservation, and stadium concession. One of the commonalities and why REDF is interested in them is that these social enterprises are employing individuals that have experienced homelessness, formerly incarcerated, as well as individuals who suffer from substance abuse or mental health disabilities. We're really proud of our results to date, and we're going to share with you those today. So these are results that are since our founding in 1997. And since then, with the help of our portfolio organizations, we've been able to employ over 10,000 individuals. These social enterprises have earned over $150 million in earned revenue. This earned revenue is in large part redirected to the individuals that are actually being employed by the social enterprises, who are receiving real work experience with real wages with a real paycheck. And overall, there have been about 60 social enterprises in our portfolio. And one of the things that brings us here today is in large part because of these accomplishments is the recognition from the Social Innovation Fund that we've received 2 grants from them. The first was in 2010 for $7.5 million over the last 5 years. And the second has a potential of $17.5 million over the next 5 years, for a total of $25 million in funding from the Social Innovation Fund. I'm now going to pass it over to Nicole Simoneau, who will share with you some information on what types of support REDF offers its portfolio.
Thanks, Galiana. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those of you joining us from the East Coast. I want to talk a little bit now about REDF's funding style and approach and some of the things that our grantees receive from working with us. We often describe our funding style as venture philanthropy plus. Venture philanthropy meaning that it's grant making similar to investing in a startup business that has a high potential for growth. Some of the things that come with venture philanthropy, funding, of course, which is really critical, very intensive due diligence, some tailored business assistance, a long-term relationship, which usually we think of as about 3 to 5 years or even longer. We want to build businesses that also have an effective support structure for the employees that they work with. It's very important to us also that our relationship with our grantees is very much built on trust and honesty. And we also like to do what we can to facilitate networks, both within our portfolio, among our portfolio, and with business partners in the community. The plus part refers to a couple other roles that REDF plays because we are a funder of nonprofits and because we are an intermediary. So a few examples of this would be, one, we are acting now as a government pass-through entity because of our relationship with the Social Innovation Fund. We also are increasingly investing in our ability to understand policy, create policy solutions, and advocate within local governments. We also increasingly, we have a long history of, and we also are increasingly investing in ongoing research and tools that will help build the field. We have a platform called redfworkshop.org where many of these tools are available for social entrepreneurs. We'll talk a little bit about that at the very end. We also, where possible, try to seek opportunities to be a contract broker and help to bring in revenue to the social enterprises. And lastly, we're also a convener. We convene leaders in the field, often in person. We convene social enterprise leaders and staff virtually via our Social Enterprise for Jobs network, and we often will bring together our actual portfolio to learn from each other. So now I want to speak for a moment about the sorts of things that we fund. The point of this is just to say that we think of social enterprises as double bottom line businesses and recognize that both of those businesses have both revenue and expenses. So there's the social component, the social impact component of the business, as well as the business side of the business. And at REDF, we invest in both sides of the double bottom line business. So common examples that we are interested in funding, for example, are on the business side, certainly we want to invest in things that will create growth for the business. Also recognizing that sometimes you need to make investments in your capacity or your systems in order to be able to scale and grow. We often invest in growth via expansion of new business lines. And generally, anything that helps us to create actual jobs that will offer more opportunities to the target population. But on the social side, increasingly we're making many investments on this side. We invest in a lot of what we call employee supports. It could be job training to make sure that that is funded in the enterprise, but also job placement, employment coaching, also things that help your employees take advantage of the career pathways that are available to them after they leave the social enterprise. So this could be things like accessing guard cards or ServSafe certifications, forklift training, or even sort of having relationships with community colleges for education. And also things like barrier removal, whether that's helping individuals with food systems and security, transportation, or driver's license assistance to remove fines. All of these are things that we have funded before. And one of the questions we frequently get is about whether our funding can be used to subsidize staff salaries for the people who run the social enterprise, and if it can be used to subsidize the wages that are going towards the social enterprise workers. The answer to both of those things is yes. So we like to think that grantees benefit quite a bit from being in a venture philanthropy portfolio with REDF. So I want to highlight some of the ways that we deliver services to our grantees. It really comes in a variety of ways. So obviously there's grant making. We do quite a bit of tailored business assistance, which I'll speak into a little more detail in a moment. We also have monthly VC meetings, which stands for Venture Committee. A Venture Committee meeting is a monthly meeting between REDF and your organization. It's made up of your portfolio manager and your senior associate at REDF, but then also a group of individuals as you select them at your social enterprise. So usually it's the social enterprise director, it may be your CEO, depending on your structure. And what we do at these meetings is we review progress against goals. So we want to understand how many people you're employing, any new job slots that have been created, how well you're retaining people in those jobs versus having people stop showing up or quit or having to terminate them. We also really want to understand your enterprise financials on a monthly basis and identify any operational issues that we can help solve. Overall, what's key to these meetings is that we think that it's not like a normal funder meeting because we really don't just want to hear what's going well. We're in some ways more interested in what's not going well because that helps us identify opportunities to bring resources to bear to solve a problem. We generally like to see data soon and often, and very much think that we have a very data-driven approach to decision making and business assistance. But overall, these meetings are also led by your organization, which is also a little different than a typical funder meeting. We want this to be your time to seek out resources, use us as a sounding board, or share information that you think is helpful to us. So I mentioned business assistance, and that covers a wide variety of topics. So I want to speak a little bit more about some of the things that we've done and how we deliver that business assistance. So in the center box, these are the individuals and groups that typically deliver business assistance to our portfolio. We do have portfolio staff that have great history and experience in working with double bottom line social enterprises and have delivered a lot of this technical assistance in the past. All of our grantees have a team of 2 that's assigned to them. And that portfolio staff that's assigned to you will often, prepare a lot of the business assistance for you. We also frequently employ a number of consultants who have specialized expertise in things like employee supports or branding and marketing or things like developing an operations manual. And we use those consultants regularly to enhance our own capacity. But another thing we often do is we'll fund consultants that you identify. So if there's a business assistance thing that you need that we may not be the best to provide, we also are, we tend to be very generous with providing resources to hire consultants. And finally, we have a really terrific program called the Farber Internship Program. which is a program for typically MBA students in between their first and second year. And these are individuals looking for some social sector experiences. They generally have consulting backgrounds at one of the major consulting firms in the country, and they may even be interested in working at a social impact company after they finish their MBA. These are interns that are here for a summer, and they generally work full-time at the social enterprise organization, so at your organization. It's by your choosing. It's not required of anyone. I highlight it mainly because our portfolio right now has, we've heard several times that having the Farber interns located at their business has been one of the things that they've enjoyed and benefited from most in their relationship with REDF. So a couple types of business assistance that we provide. These aren't overly organized in buckets, but just to give you a sense, there's things in the employee supports realm, thinking about, the job design that you want to offer your participants, the overall program design, thinking about when do people receive training and when do they receive soft skills training, how often do they receive performance reviews, what sort of term limits might you have, et cetera. And even what type of retention support do you have to support them in their jobs after they transition on. And also recruitment, thinking about how do you do outreach and build the best pipeline of potential workers. Certainly, we also do or provide resources for you to have business mentoring. We like as much as possible to help out in business development and sales strategies. Very much we believe that ultimately the key to creating jobs and employing people comes from bringing in revenue to the business. And where possible, provide help with creating contracts and procuring, getting other businesses to procure services from your social enterprise. If you're thinking about starting a social enterprises, we've done feasibility analyses for probably any industry you can think of, and we frequently refresh those as needed for to be up to date with what you're considering. We do a lot of market research and marketing strategies for new and existing businesses, and often we'll refresh break-even analyses for businesses in the portfolio. We also like to make sure we're investing in things like performance dashboards, your overall data management and financial systems, and your capacity to do strong financial reporting. This isn't necessarily to serve your relationship just with REDF, but it is something that we hope will surpass your relationship with REDF, that you'll kind of institutionalize and keep using. It's really kind of as desired by the social enterprise.
So I'm going to explain to you explain a little history about the Social Innovation Fund, exactly how REDF became a grantee, and some results to date. So the Social Innovation Fund was authorized under the Edward M. McKennedy Serve America Act in 2009. And really this was an initiative really pushed by President Obama to fund organizations that are proven social innovations and an opportunity to scale them. So this act was authorized in 2009, and it established the Social Innovation Fund under the Corporation for National and Community Service. This department is actually the same department that kind of organizes and funds AmeriCorps. So the Social Innovation Fund was established in 2009, and they put out a competitive process. REDF applied and was actually one of the first grantees of the Social Innovation Fund, and 16 intermediaries were selected to be part of this first cohort. Now, really, the idea behind the Social Innovation Fund was a recognition that the federal government may not necessarily know exactly who are and what are the best organizations out there doing really innovative work. And so the idea of the 16 intermediaries, or the idea of selecting intermediaries, were that those intermediaries are the experts within their own community, and that they can then go and subgrant to other organizations that are doing some proven innovations and are really an opportunity to scale them. So out of the first social innovation grant, REDF was awarded $7.5 million over the course of the 5 years. And the goal was to employ low-income California residents through social enterprise. and really California residents within our target population. The goal was to employ 2,500 people by 2015, and that 70% of those individuals remained employed after 1 year. So 10 subgrantees were selected within REDF's portfolio, and those subgrants went to innovative organizations all across California. Now, as far as results to date, so as well as results today, as 2,500 people were employed as of July 2015. So as you can see, we've actually already surpassed that goal with about 10 months to spare. In reality, we met the 2,500 goal in January and February. So we have 10 months to spare, and really expecting that by the time this grant ends, we will probably exceed 3,000 individuals employed. Overall, what we found was that through the Social Innovation Fund, part of the requirement is to do an evaluation over the course of those 5 years to see the impact of your work. And that evaluation was conducted by the Mathematica Policy Research Institute. And that Mathematica job study found that overall, that employees that were employed by that social enterprise experienced overall better well-being. In addition, there was a 253% increase in housing stability. So individuals were measured before entering the social enterprise and then followed up with 12 months later. And really, that's pretty impressive to see a 253% increase in housing stability. We also saw income significantly increase, as well as substance abuse decrease. We saw lower recidivism rates with 4% reported arrests. There was strikingly growth in employment stability. So more than 50% of the employees that were followed up with 12 months later, or about 12 months later, were still employed and still working, whether at the social enterprise, but the majority of them were working outside of the social enterprise. And finally, there's a high return on investment. So not only are individuals within our community that are getting jobs and staying in jobs, and those individuals most likely would not have found a job otherwise, but there's also a return on investment for the individuals within our society. So every dollar that the SE spend saves taxpayers $1.31 and provides over $2 in benefits to society. Really, this is pretty impressive considering our portfolio of only 10 organizations, and we're really looking forward to see how we can spread this impact outside of California. I'm going to now pass it over to Karen, who will speak to you specifically about our 2016 portfolio and the process to apply.
Thanks, Galiana. So this is Karen speaking now, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how the new SIF portfolio supports the new REDF strategic plan for the next 5 years. So REDF began in the Bay Area, and for the majority of our history, we've operated within the Bay Area. But with our 2010 SIF grant, we were able to expand down to Southern California, as well as double down on investments in the Bay Area. So through support of the Social Innovation Fund, we were able to move beyond Bay Area and expand our reach into the rest of California. What REDF is hoping to do in the next 5 years is now expand our reach nationally and move beyond California into other geographic regions of the country. We'll continue to support a portfolio in California, but we're also really excited about moving into other geographies thanks to the support of the Social Innovation Fund. To go over some of our goals for this expansion in the next 5 years, first and foremost, we're looking at job creation. So our goal for this new Social Innovation Fund portfolio is to employ 7,500 individuals between 2016 and 2020. This is actually just a small portion of the number of jobs REDF is hoping to create as a whole organization, but these are the number of jobs that will be supported specifically through the SIF portfolio. What does that mean for each individual group in our portfolio? Depending on how many groups actually end up in our portfolio, this could average out to be about 75 to 100 individuals employed per subgrantee per year. I want to make clear that this is on average, and most groups, or many groups, may not actually start out with that number, but we're expecting that with the additional funding and support from REDF, the subgrantee would be able to grow their number of people employed and increase it out so that on average by the end of 5 years they would have employed up about 75 to 100 individuals. And of course, we want to make sure that these jobs and this growth continues beyond 2020, and so a big portion of the work that we'll be doing with our subgrantees will really be to work with them to ensure that their social enterprises are functioning sustainably and able to support the jobs on an ongoing basis and continue to grow them beyond the end of the Social Innovation Fund grants. The other big goal we have in this next round of funding is geographic expansion, as I mentioned before. So not only are we hoping to expand within California, meaning we'll continue to strengthen and build on our Bay Area and Southern California ecosystems, but we may also look at other potential areas in California that would support social enterprise. We're also looking at going into 4 to 6 additional geographic clusters, which means in addition to California, we'll be looking at 3 priority geographies. These geographies include the West, the Midwest, and the South. And the reason we're selecting these regions is largely based on the high-touch model that Nicole described earlier. REDF spends a lot of time working with our grantees, and a lot of it is hands-on and in person, and we really are trying to think about what is possible for us to do to maintain that high touch. However, we have been getting a lot of questions, so I do want to preemptively state that if you're not in one of these 3 priority geographies, you are still eligible to apply. Our goal is definitely to fund the best portfolio possible, so we are interested in seeing what else is out there. But our preference is to serve in these 3 priority geographic areas, at least with the Social Innovation Fund money. We also have a little bit more detail on these commonly asked geographic questions on our FAQ online, so if you still have some remaining questions that don't get answered by the end of this call, you can certainly check out our website. Finally, the other main goal of our expansion nationally is to expand upon cohort development. We're increasing the size of our portfolio quite a bit. We're going to approximately 18 to 25 organizations funded over 2016 to 2020. These numbers aren't set in stone, but that's what we're currently anticipating. And what we're aiming for is at least 3 organizations per geographic cluster, because what we found is that it really helps the social enterprise to be part of a larger ecosystem in their region, and so we're really interested in seeing clusters of social enterprises within one area. And this is because we encourage a lot of shared learnings and shared practices between the social enterprises in a certain area. And we've also found that with the ability to connect to other portfolio organizations, it's really beneficial to have several social enterprises in one location. So now I'd like to talk a little bit more about our actual selection process for this 2016 to 2020 portfolio. I'm going to be keeping it pretty high-level overview, but I do want to say that you can get extreme detail on the selection process via our website. We have a selection document that you can download, and we highly recommend that you go online to view it and read it before submitting your application, because it describes the entire process in a lot of detail. It includes criteria and deadlines, and so it should answer a lot of your questions. So we highly recommend that you go through our website and take a look at the selection plan document. Overall, there are 4 stages of application. There's the LOI, or letter of intent, the RFP, the request for proposals, the deep screen, and then the trial phase. The first stage, the letter of intent stage, is the only stage that's open for all to apply to, and that's the application part that's currently open right now with a deadline of September 18th. I want to make really clear that the other 3 stages, the RFP, deep screen, and trial phase, are actually invite only. So depending on what's submitted through the LOI, we'll make a selection and issue invitations for the RFP process, and then again, the after reviewing the RFP process, we'll issue invitations for the deep screen, and then after the deep screen, we issue invitations for the trial phase. But the LOI is open for all to apply to. And the LOI is really a short, fairly simple application process where we assess what the minimum eligibility requirements are and whether or not the group meets them, and then hear a little bit about the project proposal. I also want to announce that we've had a change to our minimum eligibility requirements, and we're going to be ensuring that they're all posted online, but originally we had stated that one of the minimum eligibility requirements was that an organization had to be established for at least 3 years. We are removing that criteria, so if you have been established for less than 3 years, you are welcome to apply. We'll make sure that the information online is updated and all the forms are updated, but we did want to announce publicly that a 3-year minimum operational timeline is no longer a requirement. And then again, reminds everybody that the deadline to submit the LOI is September 18th, and the application is currently available on our website. For the next stages, the RFP, the deep screen, the trial phase, you'll get a chance to go into more depth on what the programs are, because in the LOI you really just talk about what your growth goals are and how you plan to achieve them and how that aligns with the overall strategy of the organization. But it is fairly short, and if invited to apply for the RFP, you'll get a chance to elaborate on what those goals are, as well as talk about your agency's mission and results and financial and operational capabilities and longer-term growth potential. The RFP deadline is October 16th, so you'll see that's actually a fairly fast turnaround. We are planning to turn around the LOIs very quickly as well, so we will be issuing invitations for the next stage by September 25th. But we do encourage groups to take a look at the RFP or set aside time to plan on ensuring that they have enough time to complete the application, since it is a heavy lift. The last 2 stages, the deep screen and the trial phase, are a chance for REDF to really dig deeper into any remaining questions that we have and clarify any outstanding questions or concerns from the earlier stages, as well as work with the groups to set goals and assess work plans and figure out whether or not there's a working style fit between REDF and the organization. And there could be small projects that we conduct with the groups. The deep screen and the trial phase, the brunt of the burden is really on REDF there, and the lift is a lot lighter for the organizations. But the RFP is a very heavy workload, as you see on the bottom row of this table. And the LOI, while being fairly short, will require some thought and planning prior. Finally, after the 4 phases are completed, the announcement of the final portfolio will be made in early February. Again, you can find a lot more detail on the various steps and the criteria that each step is judged against on the selection document, which is online at redf.org. And then, now that you've heard an overview of what the application process looks like, how do you actually go about applying? It's pretty simple. Everything is online on our website, and also everything will need to be submitted online through our website. But the first step is just to go to our website, redf.org, or more specifically, if you want to get straight to the page that has the letter of intent, you go to redf.org/letter-of-intent. And once on that site, you'll see the link to the LOI form. Again, this LOI has to be submitted online. It's a web-based form. We will not submit any emailed applications. However, we do have a PDF where you can download the LOI so you can take a look at what the questions are and plan your responses in advance. This is really important because the web form, unfortunately, you can't save your progress as you go along, so you actually need to do everything in one go and submit as soon as you start applying. So you'll want to download the PDF to really guide your answers and set them up ahead of time. And then finally, if you scroll down the page, you'll see a link to our FAQs, which is where we are answering any questions that are being submitted throughout the week. If you email us at SIF2015@redf.org, we can answer any questions that are general, so not specific to any one application, but more generally. And then questions that come up during these webinars get posted, and we update them every Monday. And of course, also on this page, if you scroll down a little bit, you can get to the selection document, which has a lot of detail, as I mentioned, and can help answer many of the questions. Speaking of questions, when you do submit them, and I'll get into the various ways you can submit questions in a minute, but I want to make clear that we're only able to answer questions that are applicable to multiple different organizations. So if it's a question specific to your own application or your own organization, unfortunately we aren't able to answer those, but we will make every effort to list the questions that are frequently asked by many people online. So speaking of those questions, there are a few different ways you can get your questions answered or get your questions to us. The first way are these informational webinars as well as these Q&A webinars. There are two webinars that are specifically devoted to questioning and answering. The first one happened yesterday, but there is still one more coming up on September 14th at 10 a.m. You can register online at redf.org. And in this session, we'll actually spend very little time presenting information. It'll be a very short presentation, and then the bulk of the call will actually be spent on taking questions and answering them. And then we put all of those answers and questions that were spoken about on our FAQ online. There is also one more informational interview where you can list a few questions at the end, although there'll be less time for that. And then again, the posted list of FAQs, it'll be revised every week and posted on our website every Monday. These are the questions that relate to matters that concern all applicants, and so there tend to be the general questions or questions that we see getting asked over and over again. If you have questions you'd like to ask us, submit them to SIF2015@redf.org. That's SIF2015@redf.org. And those questions, if enough people ask them, will get added to the FAQ session. Again, these questions have to apply to be more general. They can't be anything related to any one organization or a specific application in question. Any other questions that you have, whether technical or content related, please submit them to SIF2015@redf.org. And please feel free to attend any of the subsequent webinars if your questions aren't getting answered. And these slides, an updated FAQ, and a recording of the session will be posted on our website, as well as all the other webinars. And now we're going to open it up to some of the questions that have been submitted through the chat box. I'm going to pass it over to Nicole.
Thanks, Karen. All right, I'm going to address some of the questions that came in while we were speaking. So first, there's a question about whether or not the social enterprises or the applicant is required to pay salaries, and does it count, or are there exceptions if an organization does not pay salaries but they provide in-kind benefits like housing, mental health services? So for the Social Innovation Fund portfolio that we're putting together right now, it does only apply to social enterprises that pay earned wages to the employees working in the social enterprise. This is not to say that there aren't many great models out there where they do job training and placement, or they do vocational training, or they may offer in-kind payment rather than salaries. It unfortunately isn't a fit for this SIF portfolio. We put in our application specifically to fund and scale organizations who provide wage-paying jobs. That said, if you currently pay a small stipend or no wage, et cetera, but you're interested in transitioning to that model, you certainly would be eligible to apply. There's also a question about where does REDF get its money from, The short answer to that is from a couple of sources. So we receive a fair amount of our budget from individuals. That means from our founder, George R. Roberts, from the rest of our very generous board, as well as through a benefit that we throw annually. This year it will feature the band Journey as the headline performance in San Francisco on October 22nd. And so that's another way that we capture individual donations. We also receive a fair amount of our dollars from foundations in California and nationally who support our work. And then, of course, we receive a lot of our budget from the Social Innovation Fund. There's a question about where can someone find all the information about the LOI process. For that, I would really like to point everyone to the selection memo or the selection guidance document that's available on our website. This is the best source of really detailed information. We had to submit to the Social Innovation Fund an overview of exactly how we planned to select the portfolio, how we were going to ensure that it was open and transparent, et cetera. And that document is required to be publicly available, and as such it actually is posted as a PDF on our website. You can access it at the same link that Karen directed you to earlier, which is redf.org / letter of intent. The address is on the previous slide. We also had a question about the name of the institute that calculated, that did the return on investment analysis and that study. The organization that we hired for our evaluation is Mathematica Policy Research, and the name of our study is the Mathematica Jobs Study. If you go to REDF's website, you can easily get to a summary online about this, and then there's a one-pager of kind of a fact brief, and then additionally you can get to the entire actual study from there as well. And we'll post a link to this when we post the questions from today's webinar. There was also a question about whether or not there is any reimbursement or grant provided to organizations who are in the trial phase. As we state, I think in the selection memo, we do plan to offer a small donation to organizations in the trial phase. This is similar to what we did when we selected our 2010 round. Generally speaking, I would say that donation is fairly small. It will probably be $1,000 per organization. The main lift for organizations in the trial phase is this is where we're going to do an in-person site visit, and so we expect to visit your organization, have a meeting with you in person. So it may not necessarily be that big of a lift. What it does do is it allows us time to dig deeper into any kind of growth projections that we feel might need more analysis. So if, for example, we feel like we would really like to have some more market research to back up your revenue projections over the next 5 years, this is where it gives us time to really tie up those loose ends and dig a little deeper into the feasibility of your project. But that may not be required for every organization. The piece that will be standard is that on-person site visit where REDF will come to you. We also had a question about how can we bring REDF to Detroit. So as far as this portfolio is concerned, the only way that you can ensure REDF comes to Detroit is by, if you are an organization in Detroit, submit a letter of intent. We intentionally did not choose specific states because we wanted to make this open nationally. We want to get the best portfolio possible. And so as such, I realize that it's, kind of can be frustrating on the applicant end to not have an understanding of where we're looking to fund, but the best thing you can do to make sure that we have a portfolio in your community is to apply and encourage other social enterprises in your area to apply as well. Karen, I may pass it back to you if there's any questions that came in while I was chatting, if you can answer those.
Sure, happy to. Somebody asked us to repeat the email address, so I just want to repeat it again. It's SIF2015 at redf.org, so SIF 2015@redf.org. We had somebody ask us about whether or not there is a resource or something in writing from REDF that describes how REDF defines a transitional employment model. And I would like to point people to redfworkshop.org, where you can actually find a lot of resources talking about what we consider a transitional social employment model. But basically, really high level, it's it's a job that people are sort of encouraged to transition out. Like there's a defined term limit, and they're working a real job where they're getting real wages, but they're also given support in finding a job placement after their social enterprise employment. Somebody asked if an organization can apply if they're in the initial stages of starting a social enterprise, so they're new to the business. The answer is yes, you can certainly apply, but one of the evaluation criteria is the feasibility of your growth plan and your experience with operating a social enterprise. So those are things to consider, but you certainly absolutely can still apply. There's a question on whether or not the funds need to be matched during the first 5 years. The answer is yes. So each year we give out a budget of the money yearly, and each year that amount of money has to be matched 1-for-1. So by the end of the year, you will have needed to match the amount that we've given away for that year, and then the next year you'll have to do it again. We have a question on what the average wages for job placement is and what the expectation on wages is. As we've mentioned before, we're expecting social enterprises to be paying at least minimum wage in their area or above. There's a question on what other REDF funding is available for C Corp social enterprises. Since the Social Innovation Fund money is federal money, we unfortunately can't grant to anything other than a nonprofit social enterprise, but we do have other sources of funding available that we can use to consider nonprofit organizations. So we do still encourage groups to submit for LOIs because that'll help inform the pool of money that we have for other types of grantees. We have a question about whether or not we will consider proposals from organizations outside of the priority areas, such as New York State. And the answer is yes. So while we do have a focus on our priority areas, our number one priority is really to put together the best portfolio possible. And so we do want to see what other organizations are out there, and it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that another geography could be considered. And then also because of the other sources of funding that we have, which we are able to extend to other areas, we are interested in just understanding what the other groups out there that are doing in other areas. So we do still encourage groups outside of the listed priority geography areas to apply. We have a question on whether or not your organization needs to have a set growth plan. That is one of the main criteria that we'll be judging the LOIs against. And it doesn't have to be 100% set in stone, but you obviously need to have put some thought into how exactly you're going to grow the social enterprise and what your longer term goals are in terms of growth. And there's a question on a minimum number of employees a business needs to support to be a realistic candidate. I mentioned earlier that the average we're expecting to see is around 75 to 100 people employed per year per organization, but that is, like I said, just an average. So a group that starts out a little bit smaller but has a lot of potential for growth and maybe has hundreds by 2020 could end up averaging out to be about the same. That said, we are just interested in groups that have high potential for growth, and so I wouldn't worry too much about exact numbers, but just lay out what you think is realistic for your organization. There's a question on whether or not Virginia is considered the South, and yes, we would consider it to be in the South. I'll answer a couple more, and then I'll pass it back to Nicole. there's a question that was on, is there a client-served minimum? And as I mentioned, there isn't really a minimum, but we are hoping to see an average of 75 to 100 people. I do want to mention that that's people employed, and that doesn't necessarily mean job slots. And since it's a transitional model, a company that has maybe 20 job slots could feasibly be hiring 75 to 100 people a year, depending on how long each person stays in that job slot. And then finally, there's a question on whether or not each applicant has to propose 3 enterprises. And no, you can certainly just propose 1 enterprise. We wanted to give organizations that had multiple social enterprises operating the space to describe all of them, but you certainly do not need to have 3 social enterprises. You can have just 1. And Nicole, I'll pass it back to you now.
Thanks, Karen. There's a question about what about organizations whose primary goal is to do job training so that their clients can then go to permanent employment, and that transitional employment may be part of the training, and it may grow, but ultimately the goal is permanent employment. So I guess what I would say to that is, ultimately for REDF, permanent employment is also the goal, and that's why we didn't just hold ourselves accountable for the number of people served in the transitional jobs. We also held ourselves accountable to having 70% employed a year later. The reason we focus on transitional employment is because we're trying to serve the hardest to serve, with the philosophy that, if someone can receive some workforce services on helping with their resume, maybe some computer literacy, some financial literacy, some interviewing skills, and then they're able to move into a job, and even if maybe they take vocational training, but then they're able to get and keep a job, then they wouldn't need to be in a transitional job. Transitional jobs, because they are subsidized and they provide these other supports, are really meant for people who, no amount of resume polishing or interviewing skills alone is going to help them get and retain employment. But they need a transitional job experience to practice working for a real wage, to learn things on the job about how to work and communicate with peers, how to communicate with a supervisor, how to start budgeting, how to build the positive habits of showing up on time, etc. But ultimately, the goal is for those individuals to get and retain permanent employment outside of the transitional social enterprise. There's also a question about whether or not you can charge an admin fee, an administrative fee to the grant. The answer is yes. So if your organization has a federally approved indirect cost rate, we will honor that indirect cost rate on your grant. If you don't have it, or for whatever reason you choose to not use it, you can still fund administration or indirect costs via the REDF grant, and it's just would be determined on a case-by-case basis what is sort of appropriate for your organization. There's also a question about our collaboratives or partnerships eligible to apply. So we've made the decision to not allow joint applications. So one or both of the organizations would be putting in a separate letter of intent. But certainly if a partnership is a key part of how you would meet the program requirements or how you would accomplish growth, absolutely talk about that in your LOI, and that can make you very competitive, but you will need to choose a primary applicant. And if one of the partners, for example, does not meet the eligibility requirements, like maybe they're not even a 501c3, it would be the organization who does meet the full eligibility requirements. That would be the primary applicant. If both meet all the eligibility requirements, there's no harm in both applying. There's a question about our target population and whether we serve organizations that work with underserved youth or like low-income youth. The answer is yes, we do serve what's often called the opportunity youth segment. Generally, these are young adults, maybe age 18 to 24, who are not in work or in school. Often there's a kind of a correlation with emancipating foster youth. That absolutely is a population that we currently serve and will continue serving. Previously incarcerated is also a very important group that we serve, as well as individuals who have faced homelessness or continue to face homelessness in their lives, and also individuals who have a history or current challenge with mental health issues or disabilities. We don't specifically specify things like veteran status or immigration status as part of our target population, which is not to say that those things cannot pose barriers to employment, but what we would say is what we'd be looking for are kind of the underlying causes. Where is there a co-occurrence with being a youth out of work or school, or having a kind of a risk of homelessness or previous incarceration? It's that underlying characteristic that we would use to kind of qualify someone as to whether or not they would count for employment. There's also a question about, are we looking for applicants who, are running programs that really prepare people for careers, or are we just looking for low-skilled jobs? So, in an ideal world, we would want something that is a low-skill enough job that it's accessible for the population we're working with. Often we're working with individuals who have not finished high school. They have a history of incarceration. They may have never had a job in their lives, and they may have a history, be sort of just a few weeks ago homeless. And often, a higher skilled job is not going to be accessible to that individual. So we want jobs that are accessible to the target population that you're trying to serve. And in an ideal world, sure, it would be great if those jobs also led to, a middle skilled job and like a sort of potential for a career with increased earnings opportunities. That's kind of a holy grail, and it's very difficult to find. So the answer is that we really are looking for both. And we understand if maybe you have a program that's meant to get people into middle skill jobs, and maybe one of the places that you want to invest in is ways that you can provide the supports and the training to get your target population ready for that sort of a job. Or alternatively, if maybe you have a social enterprise that provides lower skill jobs, and what you want to invest in is sort of supports and partnerships that would enable individuals in that low-skill job to receive additional vocational training or certifications or community college, get driver's license, get their GED, and things that would help them make the best kind of out of the careers that are open to them. We're interested in both of those things. There's no really perfect model that is low-skilled to start and then has this great middle-skill career possibility. Karen, can I pass it back to you for any that came in while I was talking?
Absolutely. I think we're almost up on time, but I can answer a couple more. There's a question on whether or not we fund already existing startups to further expand capabilities and offerings to grow more jobs. And the question to that is yes, absolutely. That's what we're really excited to see, existing startups increasing their growth, or new social enterprises or existing social enterprises. And then finally, the last one, just to clarify, social enterprise L3Cs and LLCs are not eligible. So correct, for this round of social innovation funding, organizations do have to be 501c3s. Nicole, I can pass it back to you just to wrap up.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you, Natasha and Galiana, for helping us out today as well. I realize there's a number of questions that we didn't get to, some of which we have answered in the previous webinars, and may have posted FAQs addressing them already. So we will make sure that we address all of the unanswered questions in an updated list that gets added to our website. In the meantime, if you want an answer prior to then, please go ahead and take a look at our website where the frequently asked questions are listed, or perhaps listen to the other webinars, the recordings of which are already on the website, and that may get you an answer even more quickly. Thanks everyone for joining us today. There's a very short post-webinar survey that we'd love for you to take to let us know your interest in applying, and we hope to see applications from all of you. Thank you.